Ryuga Gotoku are no strangers to experimenting with strange new ideas for the Yakuza series. After all, we're talking about a franchise that suddenly switched from arcadey beat-em-up combat to turn-based JRPG gameplay with its 7th mainline entry. So you never truly know what to expect out of a new Yakuza game, especially when it comes to the spin-offs, as prior spin-offs have had us investigating a series of murders as a PI, surviving a zombie apocalypse, and taking up the role of a Ronin in Japan's Edo period. But even so, I must say, a pirate-themed Yakuza spin-off was never on my bingo card. But that's exactly where RGG Studio has decided to take the series with the latest entry. However, this bizarre move has paid off dividends, as the wordily titled Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is the best Yakuza spin-off yet, thanks to some refreshing new mechanics, a compelling new spin on long-running icon Goro Majima, a lovable cast of supporting characters, and a world offering a balanced blend of new locations and repurposed locales from Infinite Wealth. 20 years on, and over 20 entries later, the Yakuza series is still managing to fend off franchise fatigue in a way few long-running series have. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii brings back longtime fan favourite Goro Majima, and sees him taking up the role of protagonist for the first time since Yakuza 0. We've long known that Majima is one of the MVPs of the Yakuza series, but over the years, he's steadily grown into one of my favourite video game characters, period. And Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii sent him on his wildest adventure yet. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii opens with Majima washing up on a tropical island with a bad bout of amnesia after getting shipwrecked. Majima has no idea how he got here, what he was doing in Hawaii in the first place, or even who he is. Thankfully for Majima, he isn't left to stumble blindly by himself, as a young boy named Noah quickly stumbles across him, explaining that Majima has washed ashore on Rich Island, a tiny community off the coast of Hawaii. Oh, and did I mention that Noah is accompanied by an adorable tiger cub, who is coincidentally also named Goro, as Noah had bestowed this name on him long before meeting Goro Majima. I also love the stupid recurring bit that almost nobody aside from Majima seems to notice that Goro is a tiger, with nearly everyone in the game just referring to him as a cat, and treating him as if he's just your average tabby. Right after Majima meets Noah, the two are accosted by a gang of would-be pirates, with Majima quickly whooping their asses as his muscle memory kicks in. Noah then takes Majima back to his family's bar, where we meet Noah's sister Moana and his father Jason, who provides a rather frosty welcome. Here, Majima learns that Noah has never set foot outside of Rich Island, and of Noah's dreams to set sail and see the world, with Majima quickly deciding he wants to help make this dream a reality for Noah. But Jason isn't too keen to let Noah off Rich Island due to his severe asthma, fearing what will happen if he has a major flare-up at sea, and somewhat understandably doesn't want Goro Majima, a stranger covered in Yakuza tattoos, hanging around his bar or his son, so Majima sets off to explore Rich Island in search of a way back to the mainland. Unfortunately for Jason, trouble tends to follow Majima, and the crew of pirates Majima beat up earlier shows up at his bar, threatening Jason and harassing Moana, so Majima is forced to step in and beat these pirates to a pulp once more, before taking it upon himself to put an end to these bothersome pirates once and for all. So Majima heads down to their ship, takes out the crew, as well as the captain, Jack the Collector, and commandeers Jack's ship for his own, so he can set sail as a pirate captain himself, recruiting his first crewmate in the process, Jack's chef Masaru, who turns coat and decides to fight alongside Majima after seeing Jack threaten Noah. Majima, with Masaru now in tow, heads back to Rich Island one last time before setting sail, set on convincing Jason to let Noah come on this adventure and fulfill his dream. But when the two meet with Jason, we learn an interesting tidbit. Masaru doesn't just know Jason, he was his crewmate. See, back in the day, Jason himself was an explorer who led a pirate crew, but gave up that life after losing his ship and crew in a rigged battle, and has now succumbed to his sorrow, becoming a depressed, downtrodden drunk. Armed with the knowledge of Jason's past, Majima is sure he can win Jason over, and convince him to bring Noah along on this adventure. But Jason is still firmly against it. So with the two at an impasse, and with Majima now determined not only to help Noah achieve his dream, but also to pull Jason out of his slump and return him to his former glory days, Majima suggests he and Jason settle their disagreement the only way he knows how, by challenging him to throw hands. Jason accepts this challenge, and unsurprisingly, Majima wipes the floor with him. Accepting defeat and realising he doesn't want to keep his son from his dream, Jason somewhat reluctantly agrees that he and Noah will join Majima on his adventure, with the crew of Majima, Noah, Jason and Masaru taking to the high seas in search of treasure, namely the Esperanza treasure, a legendary haul that's said to contain the elixir of life, a tonic that can cure any ailment, which Majima vows to find and use to cure Noah's chronic asthma. It's an undeniably tropey story pitch, but all the pieces of Pirate Yakuza's story coalesce into something far better than the sum of its parts, thanks to its wonderful cast of characters that you can't help but warm to immediately, and the charmingly sincere writing of the Yakuza series. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii might not have an earth-shatteringly profound plotline that you'll remember forever, but what it does have is a ton of heart, immaculate vibes, and some surprisingly engaging twists and turns, including some truly gut-wrenching moments as the story crescendos, so you can expect to be hit with those big emotional moments that we love Yakuza for. Though that's not to say that Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii lacks lightness by any means. If you've played a Yakuza game, you know you're in for some weird, unexpected, and hilarious moments throughout the story and side missions here. This is a game where the title card is preceded by a crazy musical number, as Majima and crew belt out an epic sea shanty while performing a choreographed dance across the deck of their ship. Amnesia is often a lazy plot device, and it's one you'll rarely find in a remarkable story, but Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is the rare example of this trope being used to good effect. This is one of the most compelling looks at Majima as a character that we've ever gotten. This is a Majima who's a little less rough around the edges and quick to violence than the prior version of Majima, as fellow Yakuza who are familiar with him are quick to point out throughout the game. Majima having no recollection of who he is allows not just the player but Majima himself to view the Goro Majima of previous games in a new light. When Majima starts getting glimpses of his past self as memories flood back, he starts questioning if he was a bad person. Of course, if you've played the prior Yakuza games, you know that at his core, despite his brash, often aggressive nature, Majima is a good person at heart. And that's something that we get to see more than ever here, when he's not weighed down by his past baggage. Naturally, we do eventually get some answers about Majima's amnesia, and without spoiling anything, I will warn you not to expect some huge revelatory moment in regards to the amnesia plot thread, as if you expect that going in, you're going to find the resolution a little anticlimactic. Majima's amnesia is very much a means to an end that's needed to set Majima off on this pirate adventure. Yakuza has given us some truly wonderful characters over the years. I've already mentioned that Majima has grown into one of my favourite video game characters, but he's certainly not the only character from this franchise that I'd put on this higher pedestal. The Yakuza series is full of beautifully written, layered, and unforgettable characters. There's Kiryu, Ichiban, Haruka, Ryuji, Date. The list is near endless. Other franchises would kill to have a roster half as stacked with characters you can remember years after playing the games they appeared in, like fans can the casts of the Yakuza games. So it shouldn't come as any surprise when I say that once again, RGG Studio has cooked up another lovable and memorable cast for Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. When you first meet Jason, you're led to believe that he's a spiteful, standoffish jerk. But the more time you spend with him, the more you see the character open up, and you realise he is a good man who cares deeply for his family. He's just hardened, guarded, and cynical due to the hands he's been dealt in the past. And I've gotta say, while I normally hate kid characters, as they end up being annoying more often than not, I'm surprised to say that I really liked Noah, and found his positive personality surprisingly infectious and endearing. We also have a fun duo of villains in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii: Queen Michelle, the matriarch of the pirate haven Madlantis, and Raymond Law, the so-called Pirate King who rules over the Colosseum where Jason's prior pirate crew was crushed. So you know that if Jason's back in this world, he needs to even his old scores. Queen Michelle is such a fun, cartoonish villain. RGG ramped the campiness all the way up with this pipe-puffing villainess. I mean, this is a character we're introduced to as she feeds those who have pissed her off to a pool of sharks. For the longest time, the Yakuza games didn't offer English VO. They tried it with the very first Yakuza game on PS2, but after that, the games were all released with Japanese VO and English subtitles exclusively. And as that was how I experienced all of the games, it felt strange seeing English VO added to the series with Yakuza Like a Dragon, and I ended up switching back to Japanese VO for a good chunk of that game, as the English VO sounded so odd to me. So when I booted up Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, it was once again a little jarring hearing the English VO, especially for Majima, a character I'm so used to hearing the Japanese VO for after playing through so many games featuring him over the years. But instead of going with my knee-jerk reaction and switching the VO to Japanese, I instead decided to give the English VO a real chance. And I'm so glad I did, because I was pleasantly surprised by how quickly I acclimated to the English VO, and how much I grew to enjoy the performances. I think Matthew Mercer makes a phenomenal Majima. He effortlessly brings out the softer side of the character that we need to see throughout this story. And most importantly, he nails Majima's laugh. It's not as maniacal a laugh as you'd expect from the Japanese VO, but it's still wonderfully ridiculous. RGG Studio has always been resourceful about reusing assets from prior Yakuza games to keep the development cycles of their games economical and timely. If you've played through the series, you no doubt know how many of the Yakuza games take place primarily in Kamurocho, with only minor tweaks to the city between games. And once again, RGG has cleverly repurposed portions of the prior game to turn around a new game quickly and relatively inexpensively, while including enough new locales to prevent Pirate Yakuza from feeling like a cheap asset flip. A lot of your time in Pirate Yakuza will be spent in Honolulu, with that map remaining largely unchanged from how it was in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. But as this location was so different to the prior Yakuza games, it hasn't worn out its welcome yet, and RGG was smart to extract more value out of this location. Outside of Honolulu, you also have Jason and Noah's home of Rich Island, the hive of scum and villainy that is Madlantis, and Nele Island, a tiny island that the Yakuza are running their operations out of, where Majima was en route to when he was shipwrecked. And these new settings do give Pirate Yakuza a fresh atmosphere, unlike any prior Yakuza game, even Infinite Wealth, which it shares locations with. When you have a series with as many entries as Yakuza, the biggest concern for a developer is inevitably finding ways to prevent franchise fatigue. No matter how good the games are, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, and if you're releasing a non-stop stream of games, it's going to be hard to prevent your player base from getting burnt out. But Yakuza is a series that's still managing to fend off franchise fatigue, thanks to RGG's clever decision to split the series into two distinct pillars, starting with 2020's Yakuza Like a Dragon. See, along with introducing a new protagonist in Ichiban Kasuga, Yakuza Like a Dragon ditched the arcadey real-time combat of Yakuza 0 through 6 in favour of a new turn-based JRPG battle system. This completely reworked how the franchise plays, and this style of combat returned in the next mainline Yakuza game, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and it's seemingly the combat system that the mainline franchise is going to be sticking with for the indefinite future. However, knowing that this new style of combat wouldn't appeal to all of the old school Yakuza fans, RGG Studios found a way to have their cake and eat it too, by also making spin-off games that retained the action-heavy real-time combat of the older Yakuza games, with Like a Dragon Gaiden, Ishin, both Judgment games, and now Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, all featuring this style of combat. I'm someone who happens to love both action games and JRPGs, so I've just been spoilt with an abundance of excellent games to enjoy as a result. Combat in the Yakuza series has always been delightfully over the top, but Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii might have the most outrageous combat of any Yakuza game yet. It's certainly not DMC or anything, but it's getting closer than you might expect, as Majima bounces around the screen launching and air juggling enemies and flinging cutlasses like boomerangs. It's utterly ridiculous, and I am so here for it. Like many prior Yakuza games, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii allows you to switch between multiple combat stances on the fly, though don't expect as robust a combat system as Yakuza 0 or Kiwami, which both had 4 combat styles for their protagonists, as Majima only has 2 combat styles in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, Mad Dog style and Sea Dog style. Mad Dog style is Majima's traditional, fast, aggressive fighting style. In this stance, Majima darts between enemies, slashing them to shreds with his iconic Demon Fire dagger, whereas the Sea Dog stance is where RGG embraces the pirate theme, as when utilising this style, Majima wields throwable cutlasses and flintlock pistols that can be charged up to tear through entire groups of enemies in one shot. Both of Majima's stances also have a unique special attack. In his Mad Dog stance, Majima can create shadow clones of himself that will fight enemies alongside him, quickly overwhelming even the most fearsome bosses. Whereas in his Sea Dog stance, Majima can use the magical Dark Instruments to call forth mystical animal summons to fight for him. It also wouldn't be a Yakuza game without plenty of contextual heat actions, special attacks that can be triggered when your heat gauge is full mid-fight. These moves range from Majima spinning around on his hands and clobbering goons with a barrage of kicks, brutalising enemies with random objects in the environment, or team-up attacks with the pirate crew around him, like the awesome team-up attack between Majima and Masaru, where Masaru tosses pepper in the faces of enemies, then lobs a massive cleaver at them, before Majima catches the cleaver and throws it back through them again, almost accidentally bisecting poor Masaru in the process. While on paper, only having 2 combat styles could sound like a disappointing step backward from the combat system of Yakuza 0, the only mainline Yakuza game to feature Majima as a protagonist, I honestly had no problem with Majima only having 2 fighting styles here. It removes some of the excess bloat from the combat system, and allows the 2 stances that are here to be better refined and more varied, with these 2 styles feeling entirely distinct. Both the Mad Dog and Sea Dog styles are well fleshed out and feel satisfying to wield. In prior Yakuza games that offered style switching, I almost always found myself drawn to one particular style over the others, but in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, I genuinely liked both styles equally and split my time 50-50 between them. This might not be the best combat system the franchise has ever seen, but it's certainly up there for me, and there's no shortage of foes to utilise these fighting styles on. Across Hawaii, you'll find yourself taking on everyone from generic punks, to pirates, to crime bosses, maybe even the occasional bear or tiger. And I love that the enemy descriptions that pop up are in Majima's wording, so sometimes when you encounter a group of enemies, the words thugs or gangsters will be splashed across the screen, while other times it'll just say arseholes. Oh, and if you've played a Yakuza game before, you know you're in for some lengthy boss fights against spongy enemies, so be sure to stock up on health items before main missions. Or you can even prep some food for yourself, as Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii has a full-blown cooking mini-game where you can use the ingredients you've gathered across Hawaii to prepare meals that will restore your health and heat gauge. There are planters all over the world where you can grow vegetables and herbs, and you can jump in the water and catch some fish with your bare hands to cook up. Or you can just be lazy and go buy your ingredients from a shop. But trust me when I say, you're gonna want to go fishing for yourself from time to time, because Tiger Goro following behind you with his little floaty is one of the cutest things I've ever seen in my life. A new style of fight introduced in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is the giant fleet battles against rival pirate crews, where Majima and his crew will face off against 100+ enemy pirates at once. These fights provide such an awesome sense of scale and are a wonderful power trip. In these moments, as you punch out goon after goon, it starts to feel like you're playing a Musou rather than a Yakuza game for a minute. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii retains the RPG elements of prior Yakuza games, with your combat abilities growing throughout the game as you spend money and experience points to purchase upgrades that range from unlocking new combos and techniques, to increased health, to more shadow clones being summoned as part of Majima's ultimate attack. One of my biggest pet peeves in games is boring skill trees that don't offer a satisfying sense of progression, but this is something that the Yakuza series has mercifully always avoided. You get the satisfaction of seeing Majima's strength and repertoire of attacks continuously expand throughout the game, and when you look at Majima and how he plays at the start of Pirate Yakuza versus the end, it's night and day. But your ability to customize Majima's playstyle extends beyond the skill tree in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. Like the prior Yakuza games, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii offers plenty of ways to customize the look of the protagonist. You can buy new clothes or change Majima's hairstyle, but the big new addition here is the rings that can be bought or earned through missions, which when equipped will offer Majima various stat buffs and perks. You can equip 10 rings at once, one ring to each of Majima's fingers, which allows you to granularly tailor the build of your protagonist in a way not possible in any prior Yakuza game. A big part of living out the pirate fantasy is having your own ship to sail from place to place aboard, so naturally, sailing and naval combat play a big role in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. When I first took control of Majima's ship in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, I was caught off guard by how it felt to control. When you think of sailing a pirate ship in a game, you probably think of Assassin's Creed Black Flag or Skull and Bones. But Pirate Yakuza's seafaring gameplay doesn't feel like those games at all. In fact, Majima's boat doesn't control like you'd expect a boat of this size and weight to in any game. Strangely, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii's sailing is more comparable to a kart racer than anything else, as Majima's jet-propelled ship can be launched forward with thrusters and can even drift, allowing you to quickly reposition your boat to face the cannons at enemy ships. I've never played a game that made a boat feel arcadey like this, but it's awesome. Yakuza is a franchise that's always lent into its own absurdity, so why should RGG's take on vehicles be any different? I love a studio that always prioritises fun over any semblance of realism, and that describes RGG to a T. Let's be real, our measly starting crew of 4 couldn't run a ship of this size by themselves, so as you explore Hawaii, you'll find all manner of allies to recruit, many of whom are as outlandish as our core cast. You can recruit the guy who invented the street surfer segways that you use to traverse the streets of Honolulu, a Hollywood A-lister called Nicole Kidman, who wants to join your crew to do some research and get into character for her starring role in a pirate flick. You can even recruit an old woman who wields 2 giant vibrators as weapons if you so desire. Your crew members serve many roles, and you'll need to assign them to positions on the ship where they can repair the damage that you take in battle, man weapons, or join Majima when he jumps to the deck of immobilised pirate ships to help kick the crew's asses and plunder their loot. Like Majima himself, his ship can be extensively customised with new gear and upgrades that provide both aesthetic and performance improvements. From changing the paint job and sails, to reinforcing the hull to sustain more damage, to adding new weapons. You just keep making more and more modifications to your boat throughout Pirate Yakuza, until it becomes this ridiculous, colourful warship that terrorises enemy pirates with machine guns, flamethrowers and lasers. And if you want to get a little more hands-on in ship-to-ship showdowns, you can even have Jason take the wheel while you wander the deck, popping smoke to break the line of sight of hostile ships, take control of turrets, and fire a rocket launcher at the enemy. However, you can't let yourself get too lost in the chaos, as you'll need to pay attention to your crew members on the deck, and revive them if they get downed, because an unconscious crewmate can't repair the damage your ship is taking. While you're free to sail around at your leisure, seeking out islands holding treasure in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, it's not a true open world game, as it doesn't offer one big interconnected map. Instead, you fast travel between different portions of the ocean, each of which contains a few islands and a couple of lighthouses, which once visited serve as fast travel points. Unfortunately, the locations you're travelling between feel pretty cut and paste. Each of these strips of the ocean has an almost identical layout. A lighthouse at the far south, one in the middle, a couple of islands on the eastern and western coasts to explore for treasure, and a big landmass at the northernmost point, like Honolulu or Rich Island, where you go to do your story missions. And don't expect the exploration to flow like an open world game either. You can't just hop off your boat anywhere and swim to shore like you can in Black Flag. There's only a handful of specific points in each area where you can dock your ship, and once you do so, the screen fades to black and you're on the island. Like the overworld map itself, the islands you visit to hunt treasure are rather repetitive. You dock on an island, beat up a bunch of goons with your crewmates, then get a piece of treasure, some cash, and experience points as a reward for doing so. And I'm not saying that's not fun, because it is, but these activities are very much video game junk food, where you're just going across a map doing the same thing over and over again, for no other reason than the satisfaction of seeing the map get filled in with little ticks until you get a trophy at the end of it. Thankfully, when you get to the major land masses, the side activities do become a lot more compelling. It's in places like Honolulu and Madlantis where you'll find the vast majority of side stories. And yes, the side stories are as wonderfully ludicrous as ever in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. You'll stop a living statue street performer from being abused by the public, help a chef who's being kept down by his co-workers get the recognition he deserves, test out a device that lets you talk to animals in a quest loaded with jabs at publishers who cram their games full of microtransactions, participate in a parody of The Bachelor in hopes of finding Masuru a wife, And if you thought the cheeky pop culture references would end with recruiting Nicole Kidman to your crew, think again, because we have a whole side story about finding 7 mystical balls that once gathered can be exchanged with a guy called Shen to get a wish granted. Sound familiar? I think it's an especially nice touch that some of these side stories carry over plot lines from prior games, rewarding returning players for doing their homework, while letting the main story remain accessible for newcomers. Do most of the side stories in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii ultimately boil down to Majima having to beat up a bunch of thugs to help someone out? Pretty much. But the situations are creative, the set dressing is entertaining, and the writing is funny, so I'm not complaining. After all, the reason I'm doing all these side missions is to see what crazy situation RGG Studio are going to throw Majima into next, and they never fail to deliver creative and memorable scenarios for the side stories. Of course, you also can't have a Yakuza game without a ridiculous amount of side activities and mini-games to mess around with. And Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii has one of the most robust and varied selections of side activities you'll find in any Yakuza game. Pulling mini-games from all across the franchise, you can play classic games like Alex Kidd, Space Harrier 3D, and Fantasy Zone, complete with rewind and save states on the Master System in Majima's hideout. Sing some karaoke. Try your hand at a new spin on the batting cages, where instead of hitting baseballs at targets, you'll be hitting cannonballs at explosive barrels. Take some vocational training quizzes. Play Sicko Snap, a Pokemon Snap parody where instead of taking photos of cute animals, you're riding the trolley tram around, photographing perverts all across Hawaii. Hit the Colosseum and challenge rival pirate crews to showdowns, both naval and hand-to-hand, or visit the arcade and play some classics like Virtua Fighter 3 and Sega Racing, as well as some obscure old titles like The Ocean Hunter, Fighting Vipers 2, or Spike Out, a weird 3D beat-em-up I'd never even heard of before. And whether they're good or bad, I think it's amazing that Sega uses the Yakuza series as a way to preserve these games and put them in front of a new audience who would likely never have touched them otherwise. Some of Pirate Yakuza's side activities are surprisingly well fleshed out experiences that you can spend a good amount of time with. Take the Dragon Kart Go Racing for example, which has 3 Grand Prix, each with 3 tracks to race through, and customizable karts. That is, if you want to play a slightly too slow Mario Kart knockoff, where Majima will occasionally yell a Scarface quote. But my favourite minigame by far is the Crazy Taxi-inspired food delivery game, Crazy Delivery, where you ride around on a bike, grabbing fast food and delivering it to hungry app users as quickly as possible, while snagging items to extend your time and boost your score along the way. I spent way too much time getting the S rank on every difficulty of Crazy Delivery, and I have 0 regrets. This is such a fun time waster. The list of things to do in Pirate Yakuza is never ending. You can make friends with strangers across Hawaii with a wave to build out your social media friends list, take some photos with your crew through the in-game camera that's complete with face and colour filters, collect bounties by taking down hardened criminals for the Honolulu Police Department. Majima even starts an animal rescue back on Rich Island, where you can send stray animals like cats, dogs, birds, even chimps, and if you visit and feed them regularly, they'll become more friendly and reward you with ingredients. Max out their friendship bar, and they may even show up and help you out in your moments of need. The Yakuza games have varied massively in length from title to title, and Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii does fall on the shorter end of the scale, though it's certainly got more meat on the bone than the prior spin-off, the even more wordily titled Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name. If you're looking purely to mainline the story of Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, you could probably get through it in 15 to 20 hours. But that's certainly not the ideal way to play a Yakuza game. You should take your time, explore the side stories and mini-games, and just bask in the oddly charming vibe of this world. I did almost everything there is to do in Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. I completed all the side stories, collected every treasure, won every match in the Colosseum, and got the Platinum Trophy, and my final playtime clocked in at just over 40 hours, which to me was an ideal length. While the mechanics and storytelling of the Yakuza series have grown and evolved over time, one area where the series has remained stagnant is in its visuals. The series hasn't made any huge graphical strides in almost a decade. In fact, the series' visuals haven't evolved much at all since Zero and Kiwami. These games used to look gorgeous in 2017, but in 2025, the Dragon Engine is showing its age, with low-res textures, stiff facial animations, NPCs with hair glued to their head like Lego figures, and unimpressive water physics, which is a shame because in a pirate game, you want to be awestruck by how beautiful the water surrounding you looks, but Sea of Thieves, this is not. However, my biggest issue with Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii visually is its utterly botched HDR. I don't know what the hell is going on with the HDR in this game, but seemingly everything that could go wrong has gone wrong with it. When on beaches, the colours are blown out and blindingly bright, whereas in metropolitan environments, you'll look up in broad daylight and the sky will be far too dark. The lighting was so dramatically off that I actually questioned if this was a problem with my TV at first, so I switched to other games to make sure that wasn't the case. I then took to Google and found hundreds of people experiencing this exact problem, so I quickly disabled HDR altogether. But I have no idea how a graphical issue this pervasive wasn't picked up during the QA process. You'd be better off not offering HDR at launch and patching it in later than launching with the feature in this state. For the past 20 years, RGG has offered a degree of consistency unlike nearly any other studio in the industry, both in terms of release cadence and quality, and that certainly remains true here. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii offers up a refreshing new look at Majima as a character, an instantly endearing cast of supporting characters, and an excellently paced story thanks to its slightly leaner runtime. While Pirate Yakuza is largely built atop the framework of prior Yakuza games, additions like naval combat and crew management allow it to offer enough new mechanics and gameplay refinements to make this feel like something different, and not just a quick asset flip built atop the skeleton of infinite wealth. And as a result, RGG Studios has delivered their best Yakuza spin-off yet. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You can find countless other videos on my channel, including my recent review of Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. And be sure to stay tuned for my upcoming reviews of Bleach Rebirth of Souls and South of Midnight. Till next time, be well guys.